Funding for this program provided by Southeastern View, a cooperative agreement between the United States Department of Defense and the Medical University of South Carolina. Additional funding provided by South Carolina State University.
At a time when laser-guided missiles, stealth technology, and drone aircraft are battlefield game changers, we sometimes overlook our nation's ultimate weapon, the more than 1 million men and women who serve in America's armed forces. As Americans, many of their health issues are our health issues: obesity, diabetes, and substance abuse, among others. But as soldiers, they also face service-related injuries, including a unique set of health concerns that rise from multiple deployments and improved post-injury survival rates. We hear about post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and increasing suicide rates. But how do these and more commonplace health concerns affect our nation's military preparedness? And how do we assure that a generation of wounded warriors has access to the very best health care? These issues affect every aspect of American society, including national security, health care, economic stability, and the way we support the people who protect our way of life. We're talking about America's armed forces, and it's time for a checkup. Thank you for joining us for these important discussions. I'm John King. We have a fantastic panel on hand tonight to help us go through these very important and sometimes very difficult issues. Let's set the table and begin the conversation. And I want to begin with retired General Abraham Turner. Sir, for years you helped train our new recruits at the nearby Fort Jackson. When you hear about obesity, when you hear those statistics, it's a question people are asking: is America too fat to fight?
Well, John, there are several organizations that have conducted research into this obesity question, and some of these research projects have gone as far back as 20 years ago. I will tell you that as obesity impacts America, so does it impact the military. And while I was the commander of Fort Jackson here in Columbia, South Carolina, we did in fact see the devastating impact that obesity has on the young recruits that have signed up to join our military.
And do you have to change the way? Is the training, maybe nutrition guidance, is it different now than it was before because of the growing problem?
Because of this problem, we've had to make significant changes. One of the particular changes I'd like to address right now is the attention to physical preparedness and the work that we had to do to reincorporate some type of physical training regimen within the troops that are coming. And of course, nutrition training was a part of it also.
And does the military need help, whether it's from America's parents, America's schools? Where's the help need to come from so that you don't have to deal with the problem when they're of age to join the military, that it's been dealt with beforehand?
The military needs help in addressing this. The military needs help from not only just the parents, but the educators, the legislators that legislate how nutritional programs are in fact funded. And I'll tell you that without that type of help, then this problem will continue to be a threat to our national security.
Lori Diaz, come into the conversation here. You're a systems engineer by day, but a member of the reserves, and your great passion is holiday help for heroes. How did this come about, and describe the mission?
Well, actually, John, it was something that just kind of fell in my lap. I took a break in service. I came back to the service, and I just saw the needs of the soldier and just how the needs have changed so much since when I first entered the military. I took like a 10-year break in service, came back, and I was just overwhelmed with all the issues, all the needs. I actually go to my reserve unit now, and I feel like I am the counselor, the psychologist. It's just so many needs. It's just not one particular thing. Our soldiers just have so many needs that I think our military they're more aware of them, but there still needs to be more help.
You say more help. Did you feel, at least at the beginning, that you were trying to fill a void that the structure, the services were missing?
Yes, it was. I'm a reservist, and a lot of the soldiers, they come off of deployment or out of theater, and they come back, and a lot of them don't have jobs any longer. With our economy and how our economy has changed, they came back to unemployment. There's unemployment issues. There's issues where the organization Holiday Help for Heroes started out just during the holiday season, but now it's kind of, I get phone calls all the time. I got a phone call last night, and there's just needs and issues. we started out just providing toys for soldiers' children, and then you know, soldiers were just like, I need food. Just, you know, the toys are great, but we need some food. We need some immediate assistance now. There's some health issues that, you know, we need. We need them now. And our organization actually, it's a community organization, and we actually call doctors and dentists if soldiers don't have the money or the insurance. And so it's really a community, it's a community service. We reach out to all different types of organizations. If we can't help them, then we reach out to the community.
You mentioned many different things you do. Each soldier, each airman, each sailor, each Marine is unique. Every family is unique. But is there one thing, as you notice, some of it's food, some of it's healthcare, is there one thing that tends to rise to the top more than others?
I think it's providing for their families, coming back and being able to provide for their families. Probably right now what I'm looking at is the unemployment. They're looking for jobs, and you know, they come out of theater, they're making great money, they've got this, they're doing great things, and then they come back and there's no jobs available when they come back. And then they're coming back with having some health issues. I mean, PTSD is a big one. And they just don't know how to cope. They don't know what to do. And, you know, our military, you know, teaches us to have all this pride and to be, you know, strong, but they're coming back, and they're coming back to these issues that they don't know how to deal with.
And we're going to spend a lot of time on that part. Let's focus on the economic part, because Michael Pishner, Director of Department of Veterans and Military Affairs at Florida International University, you're doing the Lord's work, trying to help these men and women get back into the economy, get back into academia and learn. 1,300 at any given time, 1,300 veterans on your campus. What are the challenges they face? I assume they're older than many of the other students. Some of them may be dealing with these health issues or their family struggles. What's the biggest challenge in assimilating them into the campus community?
Well, John, the 1,300 is our veteran community. It's our belief that behind every service member serving, there is also a family serving also. So we try to get the dependents and spouses in there. We try to give them just as many benefits as we can, the veterans. But we do see the veterans that come to school, they're very dedicated, they're very hardworking, but they do have problems of coping with academia. One of them, they're coming from an environment that is very structured. They know what time they're going to get up, when they're going to eat lunch, when they're going to go to bed, what they need to wear every single day. All of a sudden you put them in academia, all that's different. Those same qualities that made them a success on the battlefield are not working in the academia. But they are very hardworking. If you look at GPAs, your veteran population is going to have higher GPA than your regular students mostly. They are older. There's probably more incidents of being married, having children, but they still also want to go back to school, get an education, so they are a success.
And do you have to work, you're talking about the challenges they face, do you have to work with your faculty and your staff to say that these students have different issues, different challenges, you may have to deal with them differently than you do a traditional student?
Not necessarily. We do have students that do have disabilities, but that is private information between them and their doctors. But the professors go out of their way to assist these veterans when they come to them. They have issues where they may have to stop out a little while they have their deployments, reserve obligations, National Guard obligations. The professors work with them very well.
And as a veteran, how is your interaction with them? And what therapeutic, for lack of a better word, sense do they get, whether it's being on campus, maybe working through campus programs, coming through your office? Well,
that very regimented lifestyle that they have, and your veterans office becomes the headquarters. You become the commanding officer in school. So if there's any problems, you're the veterans advocate. You're helping them out. They listen to them. Whatever they need, pretty much, that's what your veterans officer is supposed to be doing.
Dr. Leighton McCurdy, Dean Emeritus at the Medical University of South Carolina, help us. You hear the term PTSD. I think after a decade of war, there's probably not an adult American anyway that hasn't heard the term. The question is, do they understand it? Give us a definition.
Well, our central nervous system is equipped to deal with stress, and it puts certain body actions, brain actions in force when stress occurs. Multiple stress, excessive stress, like is faced in combat, brings about a series of symptoms. Post-traumatic stress disorder has been named. Interestingly enough, the name came in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, but if you look backwards at World War II, we see battle fatigue. World War I, we had shell shock. And then if you read the literature from the Civil War, there's something called soldier's heart, and the symptoms are very similar in all of those. The symptoms can be disabling. They can be, to a lesser degree, we think that multiple deployments increases the risk for the development of post-traumatic stress disorder. The symptoms include flashbacks and inability to sleep, anger management problems, a numbing of emotions, very noticeable to families because they say, he's not like he was when he left. He doesn't care about the children or me. Those things are problematic. Then there's excessive alcohol and drug use. And I think I've heard many times that this has kept them from retaining a job, maybe getting a job and then retaining a job.
You mentioned the past conflicts. Let's focus on from Vietnam to today in terms of the awareness in society and the openness to deal with it. If you talk to veterans of the Vietnam generation, a lot of them say they were sort of pushed away, they weren't welcomed, they were treated as differently, almost as pariahs. At least, even though we don't really understand this fully yet, what has happened over the past decade, at least is there a different, more open, more compassionate system and community waiting?
I think there is. I think there's a much more compassionate system and openness on the part of the public and also on the part of the military services and the Veterans Administration. We continue to be faced with workforce shortages of persons to treat these veterans. They're too few and not always in the right location. And that's a problem that is being worked on by our government, and we've made progress for sure, but there's much more progress to make.
Psychiatric medicine is your business. The symptoms, the manifestations can be so different. I know returning soldiers I keep in touch with, a gentleman who was in the reserves, he's in his 50s, he's in Utah. He says once every 6 or 8 weeks he finds himself under his car. He's driving to work and he can't remember. He blacks out when he comes to under his car because he's worried about an IED. I know a police officer in the state of Georgia who says he worries sometimes. Anger management issues will impact, pull somebody over, and he's worried. With the symptoms, the manifestations so different, how do you, as a community of medical professionals, figure out how do we get at this?
Well, we try and categorize them in 4 major categories, and some of the ones you described fall into one of those categories. It's hard to predict exactly what behaviors will occur as a result of post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen veterans who, in fact, when they get home at night, they go around and check the perimeter of the house. Or when they're on the highway and they see a package lying beside the road, they'll stop the car or turn around or go the other way. They're just remnants of things, combat things that they saw and believed. And ultimately, they're left with the difficulty in management of stress.
Rebecca Wiley, a lot of this falls on you. For nearly 3 decades, you've worked in different roles throughout the VA in Iowa, Mississippi, Georgia. Now you're the medical director here at the Dorn VA Medical Center. The question a lot of people ask is, has the VA adapted? Has the VA evolved? Your challenges, if we went back 10 or 12 years, pre-9/11, very different, I would assume, than they are today.
First of all, the VA is evolving into a patient-centric organization. We are right now using a new medical home model of care, which is patient-aligned care teams, or PACT. The PACT model allows the patient to be at the very center of everything that the team does to ensure that he or she has access to care, has open communication, and there's continuity of care. In 2011, here in Columbia, we served over 73,000 veterans. Of that number, approximately 5,200 of those were females. In 2011, we have about 8% of our veteran population is female, and in the year 2020, that's expected to grow significantly. Here in Columbia, we've opened a new women's clinic. Within that clinic, we have an OB/GYN physician, and we have psychologists who deal with post-traumatic stress disorder and with military sexual trauma. We have a whole array of other programs that are that are new on the horizon. We have a program that's called MOVE, which deals with moving forward with obesity and overweight. It's a program that supports veterans in weight management and nutritional counseling and what have you. We also are in the process right now of adding additional staff to deal with the behavioral and mental health issues that we see in all of the veterans that we serve.
Is the system built to handle it in the sense, again, if you went back pre-9/11 or immediately post-9/11, you're dealing with the Vietnam-era community or a peaceful generation of veterans, if you will. Now you've got Iraq is over, Afghanistan winding down. Can you deal with what I assume is just a massive influx?
Well, I believe that our system has taken the right steps in really focusing on the care needs of not only the veterans that we serve now, but our new veterans that are coming in. And I think that the focus on the mental health and behavioral health, additional staffing levels will go a very long ways in meeting the needs for these veterans.
As the VA tries, Congressman Spratt, takes a lot of money. You were in the Congress for nearly 30 years, the chairman of the Budget Committee for some time, a ranking member on the Armed Services Committee. Does the Congress and the country understand, do you think, the generational challenge here, not just a financial obligation, but the moral obligation to these returning heroes?
I'm not sure they do, or we do, but cost is a real concern. The medical health care system provides benefits, either directly or provides them by insurance payments. In the case of the Unified Medical Program, 9.5 million TRICARE beneficiaries. The cost of that program is $53 billion. 10 years ago, when that program was inaugurated, just before then, the cost for the Unified Program was $19 billion. There's a huge increase, a 250% increase in a 10-year period of time. The Veterans Health Care Administration has a budget also of about $53 billion. It is up about $5 billion over the last 3 years. Still short of what's needed, but a substantial sum. The problem facing us is how do we reconcile increasing health care costs with a decreasing defense budget? The defense budget last year was $711 billion. This year it's $646 billion. Next year it's $614 billion, and that's just for starters. We have some big challenges to face and some big promises to keep.
The promises to keep part is where I wanted to come in, and forgive me for interrupting you a bit there, but when somebody signs up, they are given a promise. We will train you, we will do this, and when you get out, we will take care of you. Not until next week or next month, but we will take care of you. How do you reconcile the solemn promise that has been made to these men and women with the budget reality? And we hear this in other issues. The Medicare, it was a contract with people, it's a social compact. When it comes to men and women and their families in the military, do you have to go back and have a conversation with them, or do you have to tell the American people, I'm sorry, we promised these people, we're spending for it just like this, and you're going to have to pay for it?
I think the latter. We simply say to them that some government makes lots of promises, but some promises are more compelling than others. And in particular, the promises we've made to our veterans, our military people, to induce them to serve. Health care is a big part of that component, that and other personnel benefits. And unless we adhere to those promises, it's going to have a feedback effect on recruitment and retention big time. And I will guarantee you it's nowhere written in black and white that all of these benefits are statutorily promised or committed forever. But you go meet with some troops and they will tell you, we were told this by the recruiting sergeant, and we were told this as if it were the law of the land, and by golly, it better be enforced.
We're going to continue our conversation. Everyone stay put, but let's look at some of the statistics that make this such a huge, huge challenge, and we can bring them up on the wall here if we can. 75% of young Americans aged 17 to 24, look at these numbers, 75% of young Americans aged 17 to 24 not eligible to serve. 25% of that is because of inadequate education, 10% because of criminal issues, 27% physically unfit or obese. And look at those numbers, 15,000 fail entrance physicals every year because they're too heavy. Between 1996 and 1998 and 2006 and 2008, the number of states where 40% of young adults were considered overweight or obese jumped from 1 to 39. Also, the military discharges approximately 1,200 first-term enlistees each year due to weight-related issues at a cost of approximately $60 million a year to train their replacements. The U.S. military, this is a big number, spends approximately $1.1 billion a year just on obesity-related medical care. And the 154 suicides for active duty troops in the first 155 days of the year far outdistance U.S. forces killed in action in Afghanistan. It's stunning, about 50% more. Let's go back and continue the conversation. Dr. McCurdy, on that last statistic, it's so sobering. Any doubt in your mind that it's PTSD, the traumatic brain injuries that are leading to this horrific, sad spike in the suicides?
In my experience in dealing with some veterans and soldiers, one of the things I learned is that sometimes this is family disappointment, infidelity back home, and a whole variety of other things that result from 3 and 4 deployments. I think that PTSD is a critical factor, but not the only factor in the suicide.
Not the only factor. Part of it, General, is getting help when you need it. Is there a culture that says, no, I have to be tough, I have to be strong, to reach out to help is to admit that I'm weak?
We try to instill what we call the warrior's ethos in our young soldiers. And with that warrior's ethos is the mindset that you're tough enough to accomplish any mission assigned. You're tough enough to withstand some of the challenges of combat. And you're tough enough to handle most of the problems yourself. With that ethos comes this commitment, though, to look after one another. And just as Dr. McCurdy said just now, I think many of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine who return from combat see it as a threat to their forward movement in the military if in fact they would reveal that they have some type of mental issue. And they elect not to speak out and request help. We've got to do something about that. I know the services are working hard to address those issues. We've got to educate our leaders far more than what we have in the past, and we've got to get this ingrained into the training, into the warrior's ethos. We've got to ingrain that they have a personal responsibility to seek that assistance that they need.
Is it, Rebecca Wiley, also need to be ingrained in the training of everyone at the VA? So if somebody comes in for a physical injury, if somebody comes in for a routine, that everybody involved is able to look for hints and clues and maybe say, maybe you want to go down and talk to a counselor a little bit?
Anytime there's a suicide, it's devastating to the family and to the care providers as well. And at the VA, we have a screening process for all veterans as they receive their care that looks at depression, and then based on the outcome of that screen, then there's another review that looks at the potential for suicide. And when those evaluations are positive, then our veterans are immediately moved to a mental health, behavioral health provider. We have a position at the medical center and at all medical centers that deal with, it's a suicide prevention coordinator, and their role is to reach out into communities and work with community partners, with veteran service organizations, with the mailman, anyone that might touch that veteran who may be experiencing some signs and symptoms of depression, and in order to perhaps reach out before that event occurs.
Michael, when you deal with your fellow veterans and they're at the campus, do they feel, number one, that the system is giving them what they need? And number two, do they more trust maybe in a community of veterans, if they walk through your office, to be more candid about some of the difficulties they're facing, whether it's worries about employment, whether it's some mental health stress? Do they trust their brothers and sisters, their comrades, if you will, more than the system?
Oh, they sure do, John. My office is staffed 100% with combat veterans right now. We have a lot of people that just come in the office just to talk. They talk to other combat veterans who are having the same issues. The conversations get quite in-depth at times, but they are a lot freer to come into the office and just discuss whatever they feel like.
And Lori, you're bringing them food maybe, you're getting them maybe reduced cost dental health, or finding them a place in the community. Are you more trusted? Are people more willing? Or are you looking yourself for signs of other stresses? If they need help here, maybe they need help there?
The military is more open to these issues now, and in our unit, they've actually come in, and it's all about educating. and they have educated us about suicide. There's always booklets available. We actually have she's actually a really good friend, and she's also a soldier too. And my unit has actually hired her to speak about these issues, to speak about suicide. And my command is really, really open to that. I mean, we had a soldier that committed suicide a couple of years ago. So I believe that that really opened up our unit's eyes, and they're more aware, they're more open. It really does something when it happens right there in your backyard. And so we're, at my unit, we're really, really, they're involved. Our command is involved. I'm involved. We have people to come in. We have people to talk to us. We talk to our soldiers. If you see something, if one of your comrades is depressed, if they're not willing to go to the command and talk to somebody, then you come to us. You tell us what's going on.
Dr. McCurdy, come in on that point. She says she's seeing a change. You heard the general describe the warrior ethos, but also make sure your brothers and sisters are watching out for you. I've been to many of these wounded warrior centers around the country, and it's amazing. You see these heroes, and they've either lost a limb or part of a limb, or they have TBI, PTSD, and yet the first thing they say is, I want to get this done as quickly as possible so I can go back. Yeah. I left my buddies there. I need to go back. How receptive is let me ask it this way, is the military more receptive now in your dealings with them to understanding that everything needs to be rethought than it might have been 5 or 10 years ago?
I think they very much so. I think the educational programs that Lauren mentions are working to a significant degree. There's more work to do, obviously, but I think they are working, and I think the command is much more alert, much more sensitive. I hear, and I've seen instances where there was a serious error made with sending someone out for a 4th deployment who was visibly afflicted with PTSD or depression or one of the others. But I think there's less of that. I think the command has become much more sensitive to finding a way for the warrior to still be a warrior and yet be sensitive to his fellow soldiers. There are also some new mechanisms coming along that are employing computer-based screening methods and computer-based games to help bring out certain information that may be more difficult for these warriors to present verbatim as directly to someone else. But
Congressman Spratt, I want to come back to the money question. Forgive me, sir, but it's your expertise. In my years in Washington, it's a lot easier, and you see congressmen get a lot more excited when they're fighting. We build that tank in my district. We build that plane in my district. It's going to open a factory. It's going to create jobs. It's a tangible proof that you're doing your job in Washington. What about when somebody comes and says, you know what, the military needs a lot more money to hire a lot more mental health professionals?
Well, we've addressed those issues in the past. For example, the TRICARE program is a good instance of where the Congress, with the President, changed the method of providing health care for all the military, retirees as well as active duty personnel, families as well as military personnel themselves. And my impression is that the TRICARE program has been adequately funded by the Congress, and is a definite, decided improvement over the past. I would yield to the general as to whether or not he believes the same, but that's my impression that TRICARE was received initially by the retiree community as a way that we would escape our promise. I met with various groups of my constituents who were military retirees and told them this is not a way of breaking a promise, it's a way of keeping our promise, because there are not going to be health care facilities all over the country with base closing and things of this nature.
And is this experience learned in Washington or experience learned firsthand when you're trying to sell these changes to people who need that care?
There's nothing like going out and talking to the troops that are directly affected by it. And
they're not shy, are they?
We're the gateway to the government for most of these people. They can get to us. They can't get to anybody else in the Pentagon or somewhere like that. They can come to us and vent this spleen, and they did it. And what they had to say had a lot to do with the TRICARE program being instituted.
I'm going to ask our group to stand by a second. Let's turn and take a closer look now at PTSD. It's a serious problem for soldiers and their families, of course, but healthcare professionals such as Dr. Ronna Chernow at the R.A. Johnson VA Hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, are aggressively addressing the challenge now, and there's some promising results. We're going to hear from 3 remarkable veterans who share their personal struggles with PTSD and the challenges of treatment. Staff Sergeant Stacy Pearsall, U.S. Air Force, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and twice Military Photographer of the Year, Arthur Jefferson, Staff Sergeant U.S. Army, who served in Korea and Europe, and Colonel Mary Martin, U.S. Air Force, who served at the Pentagon on 9/11.
Post-traumatic stress disorder can be considered as very, very bad anxiety and depression following a traumatic event. It used to be called shell shock, war neurosis, soldier syndrome. Now it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's been around and recognized for a while, and I think the actual severity of it is what we're now becoming more accepting of. Its manifestation is in three parts. One is avoidance, so you avoid reminders of the event, or you might avoid talking about the event or talking about your feelings. The second is re-experiencing, so you might have bad dreams, you have intrusive ideas, which means these memories come into your mind of the event without you wanting them to. And the last symptom set is hyperarousal, so you have an exaggerated startle response. You feel very jumpy all the time. You feel always in danger.
I was wounded in 2007, and my biggest concern was healing from my physical wounds, so my mental health really kind of went on the back burner. And it started manifesting as it had before through insomnia and anxiety, and just was stressed out beyond belief. And it was actually amplified a lot more given that I had kind of pushed it down, and it was probably by far the most traumatic combat experience I had ever had.
I was a young guy, just turned 22 years old. I was in Germany, and a soldier who was a Vietnam guy, he was a mentor of mine. He was killed by another soldier. All of us were in the same company, and I saw him shot.
One day in September of 2001, my car was parked at the corner of the building where the plane would come in and hit. I thought I heard an acceleration of engines, and then that plane just disappeared into the building. And for a moment, a split second, there was just nothing, and then suddenly there was a huge ball of fire.
But at least 2 to 3 nights out of the week, I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, crying, reliving what I experienced. Was it a good feeling? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But it just didn't affect me. It affected my family as well. It's not easy waking up. It's not. And people, even your family, looking at you like, what's going on? What happened when he was overseas? What happened? They don't understand.
The minute you go to basic training, they break you down and they build you up. And they say, if you're hurt, you walk it off and you keep moving forward. And you go until that mission is complete. And nowhere in there does it say, admit that you have a mental health problem.
I saw the trauma specialist, the civilian trauma specialist, until I left Washington, D.C. in 2005. And then later in 2006, I started waking up at around 4:30 in the morning with anxiety. So I would get up, do what I could do to get rid of the anxiety, called a local psychiatrist and got some anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant, and muddled through.
We had them close their eyes and imagine that they are reliving the worst thing that ever happened to them over and over and over again. Now, we don't lie to our veterans and say, oh, the memories will get better and they won't bother you anymore. No, of course, these horrible things should always bother you. But we take them from being overwhelming to being bothersome.
You want me to actually talk about the trauma that I experienced, and you're telling me it's going to help me? I didn't believe that. I did not believe that. And then you got into the doing the homework part, or
after you record the session, you know, you got to take it home and you got to listen to it, and you know, and it's going to help you. Are you crazy? This is what caused me to be the way that I am. And now you're telling me it's just going to help me? But it did. It did.
At the end of the session, she handed me the tape and she said, every day, turn the tape on, have a pencil and a piece of paper next to you, listen to yourself on tape with your eyes closed, and when you break down, write down your number. Every week for several weeks, that's what I did, and it was hard.
The idea was to go a little deeper every time and try and remember the small details that you try and push into the recesses of your mind, and to listen to it over and over and over again. And to be quite frank with you, nothing infuriated me more than to have to go there and to talk about these experiences that I had done so well to very, very deeply. And it was hard for me not to get really upset with my therapist over it, and to not get angry at the VA for putting me through that. I really feel like my breakthrough came when I could talk a little more openly to my husband about some of the experiences I had.
I did not believe that it would work, but it did. And like I said, I'm still a work in progress. But I have closure now. I can control it versus it can control me.
I'm really happy that I did it. I sleep well. I am writing poetry. I'm a terrible painter, but I paint a little bit. I still teach a little bit for the University of Phoenix. I'm writing. I play golf. I'm a happy camper.
PTSD is not something that can be cured. It's not like having a broken arm and you cast it and you wait several weeks and you take the cast off and you're healed. PTSD is something that I will always live with, but through therapy, I now have the coping tools that I need to function in my daily life and to be a productive citizen and to be a good spouse to my husband and a good family member and a good friend, and to be me again. Now, I will never be me before I went to combat. I will just be me, a little changed.
There is no better way to understand how hard it is, the difficult challenges, and to hear from those heroes and their personal stories about what happened and their treatment and their families. And we're very fortunate in our audience today is one of those heroes, our self-described happy camper. Colonel, it's good to see you. I bet you're a much better painter than you think. I want you to weigh in, share some of your personal experience beyond what we heard there. And if you have a question for our panel, please fire away. Just really fascinated in knowing a little bit more than a decade later, not about your own personal journey, but what you see from your comrades, those also suffering, maybe in different ways. But is the care better? Is the understanding deeper?
I would have to say that the most important thing I've seen lately is that the message is out there. There is help. It's not only available, it is for you. It is, people care about us. And I think the most compelling story I can tell you and the audience about this is that there is a very prominent woman in our country who was a Vietnam veteran, a nurse, and she came back home and she was very, very traumatized and had a lot of issues. And over the years, she became a very high-level executive in the Veterans Affairs departments. And at the same time I was going through exposure therapy with the VA, I called her because we are colleagues and friends. And she laughed and laughed, and she said, you know, it's just amazing. Even though I worked for the VA and knew that I had some issues, I never sought treatment through the VA. And I'm going there now because they have the answer. I spoke with a gentleman last week that I've known for many, many years, a Vietnam veteran, and he is now getting treatment. The treatment is difficult to do. And I think by saying that right up front to people and making that a public piece of information for the families and for us as veterans, it makes us more willing to do it. It took me a long time to do it. And like most of the people I have talked to who don't go to the VA initially, part of it is because we don't really believe we should do that. We think we have our arms, we have our legs, we have our vision, and we don't feel like that money should be spent for us. But it should, because we're causing problems in our community. And we're now understanding that. We are now understanding that our sons, our daughters, our spouses didn't take a vow to love, honor, obey, and put up with your post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever. So I think there's a huge change.
Stay with us. Laura, let me come to you first. She mentions the huge change. And forgive me, but your family's always supposed to be there for you. Your community's also supposed to be there for you. That's an admirable way to put it. But you know, we all sign up for this together. Do you see that in the awareness and people being much more willing to say, I have a weakness, or I have a problem, I need help?
Absolutely. Like I said, when I first got in the military, you were just so programmed. You had to be strong. I remember having a knee injury that I didn't say anything about for a year. I still hadn't said anything about it. But I just kept on going and doing and doing. And now I just love our military, I really do, because they recognize the problem and they want to correct the problem. And there's just more education now. There's more awareness. It's okay to speak out on these things that we kept just to our hearts, because these issues now are, like she said, they're affecting our community, and we need to do something about it. And I'm not just saying that our government everything needs to be on our government. It needs to be a community effort, because these are men and women that are fighting for our liberties, our freedom. So it just shouldn't be on one entity. It should be really a community effort.
And in terms of the VA and its help, you have one of those faces you talked about here. You're dealing more and more with women. How complicated was it? How much of a challenge was it to move as quickly as you could into realizing we have a different demographic before us?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was to convince our female veterans that we were able to provide those services. And so it has been paramount for us to get the word out, to have non-traditional forums for our female veterans to reach out to them. And we have found that to be extremely successful and extremely appreciated by the female veterans. And what usually happens is, once we have a small group of female veterans who are on board, they spread the word. They're a very strong, tight-knit community, and we find then that one female veteran that has a positive experience, we get the results of that back fivefold.
Dr. McCurdy, is what you heard from our hero here, is that typical or atypical?
Oh, I think it's very typical, very typical. And let me make a comment about Ms. Wiley's comment. 10 years ago, I surveyed VA hospitals, and there were very few units in many hospitals that had more than one common bathroom, or had an area in a psychiatric unit where females could be separated from the general population. That's changing, but it's required an investment of capital and modification, and in instances, new buildings. But I think her story is so characteristic and so typical, and including the delay in seeking something, because we're all trained to be cautious and warriors.
And so then, Michael, how important are the examples? I assume you have them on campus in your veterans, someone who's willing to stand up and say, maybe it took me a while, but I have a problem, I need help, and then to demonstrate the remarkable courage.
Well, we do have those, and I think it all goes back to this almost like a unit mentality. They're with a unit, that's their whole family. The unit survives, whether over and above your individual health. So they try to be a part of that unit. I know the Veterans Office also tries to help them out, I would say.
General, I want to challenge you a bit. You heard one of the heroes in that piece there talk about, they don't teach you about this in basic training. Do they now? Has the lesson been learned that yes, you need to build a warrior, and that's obviously primary mission, but that you need to help a little bit with realizing every now and then you might need a break, you need to reach out for help?
The short answer is yes, we do now. We've adjusted the focus beyond just building a warrior who understands that he has to be or she has to be a member of a team and win on the battlefield. But we're more perceptive now to the issues that you've heard not only on the tape, but also from here, from the audience, and also here on the stage. We've got to do a better job, and I think we are. And I think, John, it starts at the very top. If you were to talk to the Chief of Staff of our Army, General Odierno, or the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, or any of the most senior leaders, they understand the importance of getting the training adjusted. They understand the importance of getting us better educated on the challenges that our soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines are facing. So I think we're doing a better job of it. As Dr. McCready said, there's still more distance to travel. But I think we're turning the curve on this issue that we're dealing in all our military
services. Could that in part be, Congressman, that in the early days, no offense to the brave brass of the military at that point, but the early days of Afghanistan, the early days of Iraq, the people at the top had not been in combat for some time, maybe back at the first Desert Storm. But now that you do have General Petraeus came back, General Odierno came back, General Casey was in Baghdad a while before he became the Chief of Staff, is that firsthand experience at the top a lot more helpful in getting then the whole system from top to bottom to realize we've got to change the way we're doing things, we've got to open our mind to these problems?
Well, I don't think we expected a number of things we encountered, first in Iraq and then in Afghanistan. The improvised electronic devices is a good example. They led to a lot of head injuries. The PTSD been looked upon as a problem, but not such a prevalent and pervasive problem as it appears to be today. So everybody had something to learn, and I wouldn't necessarily tag it on the senior leadership, but they too probably were more concerned with other aspects of the deployment than providing medical care for likely casualties.
And Rebecca Wiley, we talk a lot about the serviceman or the servicewoman. When they're on these 2, 3, and 4 deployments, they've got a family, maybe stateside, maybe at a base somewhere else. How has that challenge changed in the past decade of meeting the needs of the families who are under, I would assume, a lot more stress?
One thing that we are doing once the military member returns and becomes a veteran, we have marriage retreats, couple retreats that really focuses on the marital relationship because that's such an important aspect of a successful life. And that's something that is very new, very exciting.
We talk about a lot of these problems caused or exacerbated anyway by the pace. You're in a wartime environment. The operational atmosphere is very quick, very stressful. 2 deployments, 3 deployments, 4 deployments. What then happens when you come home? Maybe you leave the military, or maybe you're on a base, but you're not in that environment anymore. Is that in its own way jarring as well?
It is very jarring, and it's pretty clear now in the field that multiple deployments are something that have been peculiar to these combats we've been in. They enhance the occurrence of PTSD. PTSD seems to be dose-related in terms of stress in a way. And when they return home after 4 deployments, often they are afflicted in certain ways that are going to take them, they're not going to be able to make an adjustment when they get home. I've seen people who, after 4 deployments with PTSD, who have an alcohol problem and who tragically were discharged from the military without an honorable discharge and thereby were not eligible for veterans care. And we've worked hard to fix those policies and to rearrange those things. Some of those have worked. But I think we face a tough problem. And the other thing we haven't mentioned today in terms of cost, the Veterans Benefit Authority. VA is divided into Healthcare Authority and the Benefits Authority. The Benefits Authority cost is also escalating and will continue to over time.
So as the doctor makes that case, Congressman, you're not there at the moment, but after the Cold War, the wall fell, even after Desert Storm, people said there's a peace dividend. We're going to save so much money at a time we're looking to balance the budget, at a time maybe we're looking to spend on other priorities. There's a peace dividend. We're not in Iraq anymore. We're coming home from Afghanistan. Is that naive or true?
Well, it's naive. I came to the military and served 2 years in the Pentagon when we thought there was a peace dividend, and it never materialized. Once you get out of battles like this with high tempo, there's lots of equipment that has to be replaced and lots of lives that have to be rebuilt. Let me mention one thing about the deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. We were warned, the military and the Congress were warned by the Congressional Research Service and others, that if they were not adhering to their long-standing rules about dwell time. If you were deployed to a certain combat zone, to a certain hazardous duty zone, you would be given a certain amount of time back home to get reacclimated to your situation. That was largely subordinated to the tactical needs of the deployments in both of those cases. And we've learned the hard way that there were consequences.
Whenever you have a group like this, a good audience, a great panel, you learn something from a conversation. So I'm going to ask everybody to just give a brief closing statement, maybe something you haven't had a chance to say, maybe something you learned from your friends up here today. General, I'll start with you. Take a moment or two to sum up.
Well, thanks, Sean, for this opportunity. I think that we have quite a ways to go yet to address some of the issues of this constant rotation into combat from our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I think our leadership understands that if we don't, then we will surely pay a price as we continue to depend upon an all-volunteer force. I don't think our young Americans will flock to military service if they see that we're not adequately taking care of the concerns of others who have suffered either physically or mentally because of these deployments. So the mere fact that we're having this discussion right now tells me that there's very, very good hope along the way and ahead of us. And I feel very good about the testimonies and listening to the testimonies of the folks here in the audience and those that we saw on the tape. So I see a renewed commitment on behalf of America to address the issues of our veterans and those who are serving in uniform.
Sure hope you're right, sir. Michael?
Well, John, education is powerful medicine. And I think if we start looking at education as a way, possibly a way out, we see it happening quite a bit. The GI Bill, they could tweak it just a little bit to kind of help out. Work study is an incredible program that the VA has that allows these veterans that they're going to school, they can come into the office, they can work.
If I'm from South Carolina or California or Massachusetts and I want to go to your university and I'm a veteran, am I going to pay out-of-state tuition?
No, sir, you're not. We give an in-state waiver for our veterans. Unfortunately, we don't do it for the dependents. I know we'd say that they all serve together, but it's money. We're trying to do it a little bit more. There should be a national in-state tuition for veterans. You serve a country, not a particular state. After you go out and you come back from something as tragic as combat, you might want a fresh start. This fresh start could be moving somewhere else. When you go to that new state and you bring your GI Bill to that school that you earned protecting the country, the state's going to tell you, I'm sorry, you're out of state. And you're going to pay the same thing as someone from another country attending that school. That's not right.
That's a great idea. Rebecca?
John, I've seen vast attention paid to the needs of our veterans, and I'm convinced that along with the employees that care for veterans in Columbia and in South Carolina, that we are all proudly honored to serve the veterans of our country.
Congressman?
As I said earlier, we have some big challenges to face, particularly on the budget side, and we have some big promises to keep. And I hope that those in the Congress who will be making some big cuts in the months to come bear in mind the kind of discussion we've had today. We've come a long way, but it's taken budgetary resources to help get us there.
Long way to go still. Lori?
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on what he says. I think our government is awesome as far as just doing what they do for our soldiers or our military personnel. There's no other government in the world that does what they do for our military, but there's still a long way to go. And like I mentioned in the past, I don't believe it should be all on our government. It should be truly a community effort. Jobs need to be, corporate America needs to do more. The universities need to do more. Just community-wise, overall needs to do more. So I think it needs to just be a community effort, because these are men and women that are protecting all of us, protecting our borders and protecting other countries. So it needs to be a community effort.
Dr. McCurdy?
Yeah, my concern and what I've learned here today, I think, enhances my concern about the workforce, the manpower, therapeutic manpower. Certainly appropriating enough money to hire people is there. even though that money might be there, sometimes we can't find the people there. I want to see us develop some different modalities, some additional modalities of treatment. We have what we do, and it's effective. It's effective in the hands of appropriate professionals. But I also think there are other opportunities that we need to be testing and finding out to cope with the fact that we don't have enough people. Even if the Congress appropriates more money for treatment, we still don't have enough people. And that's a big problem.
It's an important question going ahead. I want to thank everybody on our panel. I want to thank the very polite, mostly quiet studio audience for their questions and observations. I hope this conversation has helped you understand the issues and the challenges, not just from a mental health standpoint, not just from a national security standpoint, or even a governmental financial standpoint, but the community and generational responsibility we all have to these returning heroes as we look ahead. Thanks for spending some time with us. I'm John King. Take care.
Funding for this program provided by Southeastern View, a cooperative agreement between the United States Department of Defense and the Medical University of South Carolina. Additional funding provided by South Carolina State University.